So, good evening, this is George Lees talking about video number 3 on the Nuremberg trials and all the involvement of all the G8 and G20 countries embroiled entirely in the profiteering. You can see that they wear the white helmets that we've talked about in the tax havens. Yeah, white is an icon for death, as the religious jokers send all of the young people into uniforms in that perilous position, and all they have to fight for is the profiteering. On both sides the funders are the same yeah, and on both sides the beneficiaries are the same. That's Pope Benedict in his Hitler Youth days. That is Hitler's Pope Pius XII. I mistakenly gave the wrong name of the Pope in Hitler's Pope in the stories about the Canaries and the laundering of the Nazis through the Canary Islands into Latin America. That's a citation for the Nuremberg Trials History Channel documentary that we're working from, and the URL for that is www.youtube.com. Results search query equals Nuremberg. Okay, and there's the joke about Whitney and the Whitney R. Harris inquest chair. There's the joke about Donovan in a similar role in the video from the History Channel, and there's the joke about Oxfordshire, about Mr. Bean, who was actually a joke about the war correspondent for Gallipoli in World War I. And there's the candy slush that was the venue for the abdicated King and Mrs. Simpson when they were waiting for their divorce. And that is a joke about the Schloss, which is a castle in German or Austrian, and that's the candy slush joke. Hitler's nest is at the top of Autoroute 999, which is the emergency number for all of his police right through until Glasgow gets the Commonwealth Games. And the Glasgow joke is the Donovan joke, because he's a Scottish folk singer and he sings about universal soldiers and everybody being in the warmongering team now. Yeah. And there's the Royal Wootton Bassett sign for where they officially bury their troops when they come back in the body bags, and it's just not at all funny. Okay, and on the slide above that we've got pictures of the people that we talked about as we exposed all of the treason and all of the links to modern day Iraq and its brutalization. That's this image. There's Field McConnell, who was a recipient of the email but has not received that. And I got messages about the inefficiency of Gmail and the fact that somebody's server had been hacked and it had lost them loads of data, a little bit like the whistleblower Snowden from America going to Putin's Russia and blowing their secrets. All of it is a crock of lies. There's Jack Straw, the straw man who was Tony Blair's foreign secretary. There's William Hague, the only one decent enough to realise the compromised position he now is in, and he sent me an official receipt, even although he's no longer the foreign secretary, for one of my emails last week. Yeah, there's one of the 85 politicians who have retired in inverted commas, but have just declared that they intend to walk upstairs into the profit stream that is the House of Lords. There's the Able Danger anti-treason movement, and there is Ollie North yeah, in the Iranian Contras shenanigans, yeah, which make great Hollywood movies like the Watergate scandal that involves the genocidal Nixon, who took over the whole of the Golden Triangle with Henry Kissinger's help. Yeah, there's the Israel threatening thing, and the amount of money that Truman got to partition Israel was £2 million. That is not index linked to the inflationary trends that they manipulate all the way to the bank. There's the panic in the royal family and that is Crackshot Harry, the Buffalo Killer. The moment that Greg Hallett and I begin to republish all of these stories about their illegitimacy for 160 years, but nobody now talks about Greg Hallett's attempts to get them displaced by his friends in Portugal. Yeah, and Greg Hallett does not talk any longer about those very controversial themes that might have gotten him killed and replaced by a body double, because he was prepared to confront their attempts to change the laws of succession. Either that, or he's taken the bung and he's been silenced. That is a very atypical thing, but because Jim Fetzer is now making interviews with the new one, nothing will surprise me. Yeah. And I'd love to talk to Field McConnell openly, because he has a huge international perspective, but everything is ever so secretive, and when you begin to reveal that Brian Gerrish is actually a cover with all of his freedom fighting and all of his friends, that he's got too many for me to befriend him on Facebook, but when we reveal that he is just part of the Gerrish interlocks to the Rothschilds family, it's a different man. Yeah, and it's the same with the Wellesley Wood joke that the conspiracy theorists put out. There's Rifkind. We've got all of his director numbers, and they're all over the series of disclosures. Yeah, there's my disclosures to Miss Patricia Tom, and that is her letter, PTELLS Lees VO1, that has been lodged with the Jedburgh Sheriff Court, that reveals all of this. And they're now really nervous about declaring again that it is evidence of my bad behaviours, because when they said that, they had not read any of it. Now they have, and there's the confirmation that Miss Tom the solicitor has the same CEO as the Lothian and Borders Police, because she used to work for the Borders Council, and all the asset stripping that goes on under Hutton's regime is absolutely massive. And there's the list of recipients that have failed to acknowledge my email, and John Patterson has eventually conceded that he got it, but I had to coerce him into online live watching my attempts to send it to him, and when it popped in, he said, yeah, I've got it. He will not give me a signature, and he will not get his friends in the treason movement to get me a list of signatures that declare that they're prepared to do anything about this and our attempts to out Rifkind and the war crimes in Iraq. Tony Blair has atypically done the decent thing, and I don't want Cameron to resign, because Cameron can conciliate through that office of the Whitney Conservatives and take the world back to decency and prosperity. Right then, let's finish the movie on Nuremberg. It's in the other room, and we're cast into darkness. It'll take ages to warm up. And I'm going to try and experiment with the sound, because it was terrible in the last one. Okay. So there's our mate Stalin, and I'll try on this other channel to get up my website so I can show you. No, let's just do it quickly. So Stalin was trained in Tavistock. Yeah, he was in Sydney Street in London when they had the fire there and the siege, and Winston Churchill is pictured with all the policemen around him. So that's the earlier video, and I'll just shut that down now.
Good morning. Guilt again.
Right then. So this is where we got to. Let's see if I can make it play, because it's been frozen in that position for several hours now. Okay, so we've got about 1/3 of the story to tell, and that Stalin trained in Britain like Hitler, and totally gifted Russia for his efforts and his total desertion of his own country. And his name was not Stalin. It's like the use of the name is something that actors, popes and army genocidal leaders are allowed to give, and how they fiddle with the names. I have discussed that at great length in the identity fraud videos we've made. Yeah, it's amazing. They're allowed to cheat, steal and lie, and the genocide bit is ignored. I don't know what went wrong with the soundtrack earlier today.
He correctly saw the flight by Hess to England as an unforgivable attempt to arrange a separate peace with the English, and thus isolate Russia against the German onslaught. An IQ test of the defendants showed the top leadership of the Third Reich averaged a university level 128.
So that's what John Patterson knew was coming in this documentary when he told me about the IQ for the police, and he was not aware that I would make a documentary about this.
Dull normal 107. But in the intellect of Albert Speer, as German Minister of Armaments, he had wrought wonders of production for Adolf Hitler. He had wept over at his hero's death, but emotion is no great part of it. The fierce death rate among the 400,000 forced labor.
So, these are all body doubles, and that is the man that was unhinged. He was incarcerated in Britain. That's Rudolf Hess. Look up BBC Scotland, Hess and Hamilton, and you'll see how confused BBC Scotland are about the whole thing. Yeah, it's amazing. And the whole of them are loyal to all of the cause. Yeah, and they're really good and genial looking people. Sally Magnuson was my heroine when I came back from Scotland, because I thought she'd been stolen from in the Icelandic banking crash. But when I learn about the religious fraud and her running songs of praise on a Sunday night for 15 years or so, then I begin to see the light. Yeah, and it's just amazing how greedy they are and ruthless they are in covering up the history of our world. Nowadays, no one, including David Cameron, is prepared to do anything really serious apart from financial crimes. Yeah, but the war crimes have been impinged upon, and Blair has been shamed into potentially being one of the last genocidal world leaders that the world has been imposed. Cameron has a real opportunity to take that away. Okay, I don't think this is going to be a smooth transition because I've left it running cold for so long, but let's go. No. So do you see the links? John Patterson mentioned the IQ for the police. He knew I was onto this video. I've referred it to him in our discussions, but he did not know I was going to make a video on it. Okay, so we're not allowed to talk openly. Yeah. Yeah, so that's the way the world fails to work, because when you get to the vital truths, yeah, and when you get deeply into how the investigative journalists think, then you are just confounded like this. Okay, what's it gonna do? So, we've just had a declaration that the Germans get their soldiers and their leaders.
We want a membership scheme because we see the readers as really being part of the Guardian. Guardian has no...
The intellect of Albert Speer. As German Minister of Armaments, he had wrought wonders of production for Adolf Hitler. He had wept openly at his Führer's death, but emotion was no great part of him.
So do you get it? They need to gauge their IQ, and that is a cover for role of intelligence in wartime. Do you get it? And this is a joke about the Rotary Club and the Isle of Man icon, where they also wear white helmets. Yeah, like the Nuremburg cops. Everywhere where the havens are, like Brighton, near where John lives, they've got white helmets. Yeah, and it is ever so sinister, because the Isle of Man is where Feuerhop came from after he had left Hitler Youth. Okay, that's Tiny Roland's. Let's keep going. Do you see it? The mummers and all of the jokes about the spoken wheel, that is the same joke. It's ever so clever, and then it becomes Kylie's dance, and it's already the joke about religion that is Wilson, Betty and Keppel as they dance around in their Egyptian roles as a cover for the joke about the Garden of Eden at the bottom of the Pishon River. Yeah, and it's now we're into the River Spree story, which has been converted to Albert Speer, and the stories that Greg Hallett told us about the float planes and all of the personnel, all of the British people that were involved in taking Hitler and Eva Braun and Bormann out of the River Spree region on the float planes into their new life. In Hitler's case, according to Hallett, that was in Barcelona, where Winston Churchill had him killed because there was too much news about his body doubles and his presence near the monastery at Montserrat. The rat thing is really important. It's like a joke for them, and that's the Pied Piper joke from the people that wrote the Aryan myths. Right, let's go for lack of battery power.
The fierce death rate among the 400,000 forced laborers he had demanded from Fritz Sokol, the conscript labor czar, had not turned a hair on Speer's handsome patrician head, but it had put him in mortal danger, and he sought a way to live.
Speer was an engineer and an architect who knew how to think through a problem in a very analytical way. And he very clearly had thought through what would work best at Nuremberg, and he read that court very well. They didn't want any excuses, they didn't want any alibis, they wanted to hear it.
See the Admiral units, the canaries stories, everything is a joke, and that's why they've brought in the IQ.
Was the attitude that Speer took in his own defense.
To keep the dead slave laborers from putting a noose around his neck, Albert Speer would have to use all the charm and intellect that had endeared him to Adolf Hitler. After long months, the prosecution had invoked the smoke of burning villages, the stench of prison cars, and the groans of the tortured and starved from the dry documents and testimony. They had traced it all back to a conspiracy of corrupt and vicious leaders. The tribunal retired to a judgment. In stark coincidence, on the day the prosecution concluded its case, Winston Churchill made his bombshell Iron Curtain speech in Fulton, Missouri.
That's the same Winston Churchill who attended the Sydney Street siege to let Stalin escape. And the only people that got shot were policemen, and that is the Papa Sokolou, I'll let me wank you off for a fee, in the personal services joke. Isn't it funny? And Churchill is a murderous bastard, and everything that happens reveres his input, and then it becomes the Warner Brothers films which win the Oscars and make the horses the heroic icons, yeah, in the conflicts and the Life of Pi movies. It is tragic. Yeah, that's the Tigger joke. All of them characters in Operation Winnie the Pooh. And all of that about warmongering and the diasporas into other continents. But Greg does not tell the stories about Foucault and all of the involvement of the French presidents who were the victims of assassination attempts. Let's keep going for lack of time.
Effectively launching a Cold War.
Well, this is what the Nazis...
So as soon as the conflict is finished and all the villains are released into their new homes, they're into the demonization of the communist again, after in Italy and in France killing them. That's Lucky Luciano from America under Nixon's orders. And Nixon is only known for electoral crime and shaking the hands of Mrs. Simpson and the abdicated king in the 1960s, because they're all having a laugh by that stage, and the Hogan's Heroes films are already having a belly laugh all around the world. And that's the Bing Crosby war bonds joke and the cross party and cross boundary treason that is wartime profiteering.
Independents had figured would happen all along, that at some point the West would wake up to the fact that the Germans were not their real enemies, but the communists were the real enemies. And when Churchill made that speech, that seemed to confirm all of their convictions, and they really thought that at this point they could not be convicted, they would not be...
See my timeline and see how closely intertwined they are. That's why I'm really disappointed that Andrew Carrington Hitchcock will not confirm receipt of the emails that makes the world leaders complicit in the modern day war crimes, since Tony Blair came into office and since Rifkind was the Foreign Secretary in 2002. All of them get away scot-free. They get remunerated again at the Leveson, and that's why I've put the Leveson on the front image. The Leveson is from Liverpool. The critter, the Leveson, directly related to the Dukes and Duchesses of Sutherland that send all of the innocents to Australia for stealing bread. And that's the bread and wine joke that Jesus shared with the world. And most of them, you don't even have to give confession now to partake in that. All of it is just for profit and to kill people. And you're really, really good at it, but nobody notices it but me and a few dozen people, especially since Greg Hallett was shut down.
Condemned, they would not be executed.
Hess whispered to Goering, "You will yet be Führer of Germany."
The whole process took perhaps about a month, during which, when the judges were in their chambers, they were going over the guilt and innocence of these people. And they did a very conscientious job.
On October 1st, 1946, after 315 days of trial, the sentences were pronounced.
Hermann Wilhelm Goering, on the counts of the indictment on which you have been convicted, the tribunal sentences you to death by hanging. Joachim von Ribbentrop, death by hanging. Fritz Stauffel, death by hanging. Julius Streicher, death by hanging. Wilhelm Frick, death by hanging. Hans Frank, death by hanging. Alfred Rosenberg, death by hanging. Wilhelm Keitel, death by hanging. Ernst Gaudenbrunner, death by hanging.
Also sentenced to death were Jodl, Seyss Inquart, and Martin Bormann, who was tried in absentia.
So you know the Bormann story. He was on the Spree plains. He was taken out. I forget the name of the British officer that flew that plane and picked him up. And the yellow submarine is a massive part of this story, but nobody tells it but me now, since Greg took the fall or the bung. And it's just amazing how everybody releases only a narrow sector of expertise, and when somebody begins to string the strands together, like John Patterson's been obliged to do, because he listens to me and he tells me that I'm really good at explaining things, but then we were on the verge of taking the world back into decent hands and away from the corrupted system, he deserts us and he moves back to the laughing at their jokes stuff that we finished off with last night. Okay, and this is really serious because they keep rerunning it, and all the innocent countries that are the victim of it could have everything back that we've had for all that time since the EU was able to award itself the Peace Prize, and that is because they no longer fight with their immediate neighbours. They steal from them through the Rothschilds' crimes, and that is the Eurozone project. It is massive. All of it is explained in all of the videos we make, and the Gazprom is typical. It's pan-continental. It's run by the former presidents like Gerhard Schroeder, and Prince Philip is the man who precipitates it, because he says that the World Wildlife Fund, which is just a land grant operation and a series of corrupted charities, yet he says that the Baltic energy sources that are the nuclear plants that they blew up at Chernobyl are a threat to the free world. Yeah, and they're blessedly productive, and they keep the world fueled for year after year after year, but only the source of the heavy water is a secret now. It was from Norway, then it came from New Zealand, where we have all the Nobel Prize laureates in physics. Isn't that funny? And Norman Kirk gets topped because he tries to stand against the winds of change that eternally take us to war.
Hess, Funk, and Rader got life prison terms. Speer, von Schier, von Neuer.
So that's Hess, who's a friend of Archie Hamilton. That's the Hamilton dynasty that live in the central belt of Scotland, and that's the Parks of Hamilton, and that's Mungo Park that brutalised Africa, yeah, as an explorer, and that launches the Park Hotels. And when the popes get displaced, or when Hoodle retires, they end up in a massive elite home which used to be a Park Hotel. All of those stories are told on my website, and all of it is a scandal, because that's Lady Hamilton that was in love with Nelson. And I used to go to the British Museum, and because I'm a romantic, and I used to be in love with my wife until she broke the contract and still is attempting to do that. Yeah, I used to think it was really romantic that an admiral in the Navy, like the people who are being acquitted here, yeah, who are the double agents, yeah, the Brits only executed one person, and that is Lord Haw-Haw, who's from the Conservative Party in England. That's how treasonous they are, and that's how they treat their friends, which is why Princess Diana is, I'm not sure whether she's in Frogmore with Mrs. Simpson. It's tragic that heroes and villains alike are in it only for the money, but Princess Diana was in it because she understands the war crimes and the landmine issues, and she tries to protest against it. But because our family are loyal to profiteering for all of the time that we can remember, yeah, and that Greg Hallett is documented as being 160 years, then she gets it in the neck because she's an innocent, and it's as simple as that. Those that get executed deploy the body double, and those that get executed deploy the TV tricks, and Greg Hallett was the one who dissected in great detail the false news that was the killing of Saddam Hussein. Yeah, he jumped onto a step, he did not dangle on the end of the rope, and Greg Hallett told us that he had 8 to 10 body doubles at the same time. And everybody believes that Greg Hallett is now interested in totally new topics, but he's no longer trying to explain to us where the legitimate heir to the British throne is, and whether or not he's been topped along with the original Greg Hallett. Anyway, let's get back to the war crimes, because that was round about 80 million dead. And all of it is just massive, and all of it is tragic, and that's why I don't want it to happen again, which is why I'm trying to be conciliatory with Cameron. He's a big softy.
Got long sentences. Fritsch, Von Papen, and Schacht went free. All indicted organizations except the SA were convicted, as were the General Staff and High Command and the Reich Cabinet.
Interestingly, the defendants at the end of the trial, well, they railed at the jurisdiction of the court.
And the Reuchlin connection, for me, is really quite important, because all of the false news is more nervous about the Christianity story coming out than anything that Hitler did. And the man who did most to reveal the illegitimacy of Jesus Christ was Abelard Reuchlin. Do you get it? The Third Reich, all of the falsification of history, and all of the need to get into the news, the false news about Pistorius, about Kevin Peterson, Katy Perry. Just the use of the Kenyan products words takes you into terror in Kenyan supermarkets, and all of the jokes about the Poisson d'Avril God entirely understands. And it's really exhilarating as we lead into Easter with all of them still repeatedly committing these crimes against other people's countries, and all of the massive continents now around the globe are owned by these G20 and G30 bastards. Yeah, it is amazing, and they're ever so sophisticated and well clothed, and the treasures that I saw in Basel, you know, in the German houses, in the pharma executive sector, was just amazing. And they've got the bones lined up in the graveyards on the other side of the border, yeah, in France, and it's skull and bones literally, and they're above ground in a cage. Yeah, it's amazing. They have no conscience, but they have it now, since we started to chatter about it. And everything in the newspapers is a cover for it and trivialised. But we've talked about Baron Cohen and Ali G, and we've talked a lot recently about Jeremy Clarkson and the Formula 1 set, and everything that they do through Eccleston Square. No one in the investigative journal sector, to my knowledge, has even mentioned Trident 3 or Trident 4, since I did my best to get that news out so Scotland could win its freedom in the referendum. But that would have been futile, because it's run by these bastards in the SNP. None of them will release the news that could free our country. Yeah, and all of the people on Facebook just chatter away about the next election and topical things like what's happened in Falkirk, since I revealed that Eric Joyce is a cover for the man Joyce, who was Lord Haw, who was the only Brit to be executed. That's because he switched to Germany. Isn't that ironic? All of them switched in and out of every one of the teams. But because of what we know about James Cagney being executed so often in Hollywood, none of the executions are likely to be real, because it's the same profiteering team at the top of the tree, which is why Stalin was in Sydney Street, right next door to Tottenham Hotspur Football Club, who take the jokes about being a Jewish affiliation right up the rear.
And expressed their gratitude for the defence they had received, the latitude of defence that their counsels were granted.
The defendants' reactions ranged from cringing to venomous. Fritsch muttered that he was drowning in filth. Frank said, 1,000 years will pass and Germany's guilt will not have been erased. But Goering thought that 50 years from now there will be statues of me all over Germany.
In the end, Salko, the slave trader, received a sentence of death and was hanged. And the slave master, Albert Speer, got a 20-year sentence. Salko was merely doing his bidding, providing the bodies that Speer needed. Salko was a crude, vulgar, lower-class German, not very well educated. Speer was a cultivated German, spoke very good English, very charming manner, and I think very clearly that this played a role in the fact that Salko was hanged and Speer did 20 years and went on to write some very successful books about his experiences in the Nazi regime.
With all appeals refused, executions were set for the night of October 16, 1946. The prison was locked down. The only information allowed in was the inning-by-inning score of the American World Series.
Isn't that amusing? Yeah, like the trenches where they stopped the war to have a football match, and that was in the Queen's speech last year. Yeah, they're really desperately sad. Yeah, and it is really desperately sad that nobody in the commoner sector sees anything that happens. Except Kate, and she's an insider trader now. And that is since they changed the laws of succession, and they had all the stuff about the suicides in the birthing chamber where I met the Duke of Roxburgh when he was having his first wife by his second child, and he immediately asked me in a state of panic, "Are you a pressman?" And the Duke of Roxburgh is relatively innocent on this scale of things. In fact, he's really quite innocent. Yeah, and all of it is a massive scandal, and all of them are genocidal and profiteering bastards.
The executioner, Army Master Sergeant John Wood, who had hanged 347 men in 15 years.
So John Wood, do you get it? Knock, knock, knock. Yeah.
Directed his 5-man team in setting up 3 portable gallows in the prison gym.
About 11 o'clock at night, the electrified...
The Calvary Hill joke again. This is the Whitney. The Whitney pop singer's death. The Whitney Conservatives, where the Prime Minister just happens to be the representative, and the Rolf Harris covers. Yeah, the author, Tyranny on Trial, the evidence at Nuremberg. It's just like the Mr. Bean stuff. He's the correspondent and the historian who archives it, and then they have a laugh, because for Churchill it's a genocide like Dresden, and he's really proud of himself, and he gets away with that as the world's most important man right up to 1955, and then when they put the next one in as the Conservative leader, they have to take him out because he's too ruthless as a fascist. That's Lewis Hill, written out of Hansard like Michael Moore, my MP, as discussed when I was chucked out of the policewoman's office the other day for mentioning William Hague and the Prince's Trust. Right then, the batteries are going to go, but we're getting quite close to the end.
Word came that Hermann Goering had committed suicide at the 11th hour, thereby cheating the hangman.
Goering had obtained a cyanide cartridge.
Like the nurse in Kate Middleton's birthing chamber, because of a hoax on the phone. Yeah, nobody knows whether that's real or it's false news, and the likelihood, if I was a betting man, which I cannot afford to be now since they removed my right to work, and my wife is stripping me of everything that I put in our bank accounts. Yeah, it is just tragic, and the whole world needs to wake up to it. But even Rory Stewart in Jedburgh is quite happy to play the stool pigeon for the man that brutalised Iraq, which was in my email to law enforcement borders the other day. none of them have recognised that that letter even exists, even although it was signed by 30 or so people in my hometown before I went to the cop shop and before I got thrown out for being diplomatic and talking about the real issues that are impacting on police jobs all over Britain, even where they wear blue helmets.
From his luggage, possibly with the unwitting help of a young American lieutenant he had charmed. He died in blue silk pajamas, leaving notes absolving his jailers of complicity. A Russian general slapped them.
So that's just like Eva Braun's body doubles, all of them in little blue dresses with really bad dentition, unlike the real Eva Braun who escaped across the River Spree in the yellow submarine, and suddenly she's gone. Like the Usual Suspects movie.
Ed Goering's face. Colonel Andrus raged. Nuremburgers delighted in the victory of our Hermann.
Watching from Ribbentrop, walked through the doors into the execution chamber. He walked to the foot of the 13 stairs leading to...
So in the earlier videos, I accused that man of looking like the senator for Nebraska or something. What he actually was the senator for Nevada in the Godfather film. Let's take it back. So, that's... and he sounds just like the actor who played the senator who killed the prostitute and then was the inquest chair when Frank Pentangeli's brother came in from Sicily. Yeah, do you remember that? The woman, he was blind drunk in the bedroom with the prostitute. When he woke up, she was just a pool of blood. And all of it is just a joke. And that is Nevada, where we now have the Las Vegas stuff. Okay, and the Scotsmen are there dancing in their kilts, all in the name of profits from wartime.
The hangman.
Goering had obtained a cyanide cartridge from his luggage, possibly with the unwitting help of a young American lieutenant he had charmed. He died in blue silk pajamas, leaving notes absolving his jailers of complicity. A Russian general slapped the dead Goering's face. Colonel Andrus raged. Nuremburgers delighted in the victory of our Hermann.
Watching from Ribbentrop, walked through the doors into the execution chamber. He walked to the foot of the 13 stairs leading to the gallows platform. He saw the hangman there with the noose of...
So that's the Gallus chicken joke in the Piso story. And the 13 is always the transition into serious political reform. Yeah, all of it is explained in Hallett's insightful stories. But nobody is prepared to champion the legitimate owner of the British throne anymore, because either that person has also been killed, or they've taken the bung, or they've been silenced by their cousins. Right then. This one's not nearly as interesting as the other two. I may not even publish it.
13 coils, and the hangman's assistant with the black hood.
The hangings were botched. Necks did not break as intended. Von Ribbentrop took 17 minutes to die. Yoden, 18. Keitel, 28.
So that's the Harvey Keitel joke. Yeah, isn't it funny? They just slot them in, and the rope being too long is the same story that Greg Hallett told about Hussein and all of the body doubles that he had.
Sergeant Woods would never hang anyone again. Stryker died screaming, "Heil Hitler!" Keitel said, Now is the time to join my son. Speer, von Schirach, and Hess was sent to mop up the blood. Hess paid homage to the carnage with a Nazi salute.
Early in the morning, 2 trucks carried these caskets to Munich, where the bodies were cremated. It is said that in the evening of that day, the urns of the 11 men were carried to the river Isar, and ashes cast into the river, carried down the stream to the Danube, and thence to the...
That's Esau the donkey. Do you get it? Yeah, and it's also the Pottersville ashes joke, and the potter's joke goes back into the Bible and the Jesus story. Yeah, it's amazing what they're prepared to tell you. And do you recognize the Esau joke, the name of the donkey, and the basis for the pin-coat tail on the donkey joke that I believe was not on the 1st of April, which is a joke about the fish and the penis, but was on the 2nd of April. In Scotland we called it Pin-Coat Tail Day, and it's all a joke about Jesus, the Messiah, and the Nazi diasporas. Every one of them gets to walk away to Latin America using the Canaries as their laundering vent, and that's the joke on the shoulder of Pope Pius XII and Archbishop Hoodle, who got to live in the Park Hotel for the rest of his life as the Nazi Pope. Yet the Pope was Pius XII, and Hoodle is the joke about the son of the shoemaker, the Pinocchio story, also used by the Warner Brothers, and that becomes the Jumanji story. Right then, I'd better get off to bed because I've got to defend myself in court soon with a box ticking exercise.
Thus ended the Hitler tyranny.
Although his absence from Washington had cost Robert Jackson his dream of becoming Chief Justice of the United States, he called his time at Nuremberg the most important and enduring work of my life. Rudolf Hess, at 93, the last inmate of Spandau prison, would end his life after 42 years of confinement by hanging himself.
So there's a relatively innocent Spandau Ballet connection, yeah. And she looks kind of like Annie Lennox, but let's not go there.
Von Neurath, Dönitz, and others would serve their terms and return to modest, even respected lives.
See the Greg Hallett story on Winnie the Pooh about Dönitz and all of them, yeah. Morton, all of the admirals, Canaris. And immediately after Uncle Desmond Morton has walked away from it all with all the cash in his suitcase, they make the Man from Uncle comedies featuring David McCallum, who plays the lead role in Treasure Islands. Yeah, and it's ever so funny for them. And Barrett in The Great Escape is a joke about the rabbits. And you just twist it around and suddenly the rabbits become the Easter bunnies, and all of that takes you back into ancient Celtic legend, because they're the puka jokes, like the black horse or the bunny. And that becomes Hitler's friends in wartime.
In the Germany they had disarmed. Woods, the hangman, was electrocuted in an accident while serving in Korea. The jailer, Anders, died at 85 shouting frantically, "Goering has just committed suicide."
Nuremberg stands firmly against the resignation of man to the inhumanity of man. This brings us to the point that really the most important thing that was achieved at Nuremberg was not the conviction of these men, not the sentences imposed, but the determination for history that waging aggressive war is a crime.
Since 1945, no avowed Nazi has held significant public office in Germany. From then to 1992, there have been...
Did you see the gable end of the church there? That's the 49 steps joke, 7 by 7, that is published on my website. You've seen the rationale for the swastika, you've heard the rationale for the cross keys. The whole thing is a premeditated cull, and the funding from it comes out of secret societies in America and in Britain. And in Britain, in Cambridge, where all the spying sector was mastered in, but not in an academic context, yeah, they come out of a place called Christ's College, and guess what they call themselves for a laugh? The Apostles. And that's where Ali G went for his education, so he could have a laugh at the world like the Marx Brothers.
24 wars between nations and 93 wars of insurgency that killed some 16 million people, many by genocidal methods. More and more, the world must turn its hopes to the legacy of the trials of Nuremberg and examine the sturdy instruments of justice forged there for new and inspired use in a world where justice is still too rare.
Okay, let's not read too much into the cast list, but it is really shameful, and that's only the first video I've watched on it, and all the little belly laughs that they have tallies entirely with the story that Hallett told me, and all of the images that are on my website tell the same story, and it is a human tragedy that the same people are still in charge of our world. But the biggest tragedy of all is that the money lenders that pick them and install them are not mentioned anywhere in the story, nor are the Canadians, nor are all of the other powers that were in those massive summits at Yalta and elsewhere. And even when Chiang Kai-shek was the fake leader in China, they're all together in crimes, war crimes, and Beaverbrook's at the back as the main propagandist, and his person, who was trained in fascist England. Yeah, that's the joke about the fascists that are shared in the writings of P.G. Wodehouse, who also laughs frequently at eating the pig like Ali G. That's the Blandings jokes, and all of them have a fear of the fascists from the South London area. And then you get Alf Garnett as a relative of one of Tony Blair's wives. Yeah, and all of it is about shouting your mouth off like Hitler, and all of it is just a crude cover for these massive and the brutalization of Dresden is incredible. When you see Dresden now, it's still a city of culture and one of the great treasures of our world, and everything is a lie for profit. Anyway, I'm going to get some kip because I need to defend myself with all of my wits about me and with no friends at all anywhere on the globe. But I'm thoroughly enjoying it. It is really exhilarating to be part of world news and to know that you're the only innocent and truthful person involved in the telling of that. Right then, bye bye. Sorry for the amateurish soundtracks and the relatively long videos to reveal the relatively trivial jokes. The other really big ones we know all about, and in the earlier videos I explained the drones and the links to the Sound of Music movie. That's Detweiler MacDonald, the no need to declare war anymore, that you can take people out using covert methods. Yeah, without any documentation, like in the law courts at Jedburgh. They make all the accusations, they make you pay to prove your innocence, and there's no way that you can do that because they have no grounds to accuse you of anything, since I revealed that all of this is written up on my website with the director numbers, and now they refuse to acknowledge receipt of my communications. They will regret it really soon. Night night.